At the Home Depot, we make it easy to turn your to-do list into a done list with our speedy delivery options. Need something in a hurry? We offer next day and even same day delivery on a wide variety of products. The best part is you can order straight from your couch. Our team is ready to help and get your order to you same day if it's placed by 4 p.m. on select products. When shopping online, filter by delivery to see availability options. Delivery at the speed you need, only at the Home Depot. We are back in the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T. Your regular crew is back. That's DJ Shockley. That's Dave Archer. I am Derek Rackley, and we are here to talk about some Falcons. Unfortunately, it's another Falcons loss. 40-21 on the road to the Minnesota Vikings. And guys, there were so many storylines going into this game. Obviously, the biggest one being kind of twofold, if you will. Kirk Cousins, could he rebound after the poor performance last week against the Chargers? And then a homecoming of sorts of Kirk going back to Minnesota. So a lot of things on his shoulders, on his plate, if you will. Guess what? That's welcome to life as a quarterback in the National Football League. So many different angles that we can take on this one, fellas, because once again, there was a large portion of this game where the Falcons were in it, had a chance to make a couple of plays and maybe get back ahead and put themselves in position to win, and then for whatever reason, and you get a couple of bad plays that go against you, and you were talking about before the show, before you blink, they're down by 2 touchdowns. And so, guys, it's hard to dissect, okay, what went wrong. Okay, because you try to pinpoint, are they making the same mistakes week after week? And it's yes and no. Are they not executing at the highest levels? Yes, you could make that statement. I think that's very true. Did Kirk Cousins play better? Yes, he did. Threw the football better, but when you look up and there's no touchdowns and 2 picks, it's like that's kind of how you get evaluated at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And guys, it's not necessarily fair, but I sit across the table from 2 quarterbacks. And so, Arch, I'm going to start with you. Let's start with Kirk Cousins and his performance, because obviously majority of the eyes were on him after throwing 4 picks the previous week. And how is he going to be able to help pick up himself and help pick up this team to try to break a losing streak on the road against his former team? A lot of stuff he was dealing with. There were some good moments, and there were some not so good moments.
Yeah, and it started like a house on fire. He was outstanding. I mean, he gets booed as he comes off the sideline, got booed coming out of the tunnel, so he got the reception that you probably expected from the Viking fans. And he comes out on the field. He throws a strike on 3rd down to Ray over the middle, and then he finds Mooney up the seam, and now all of a sudden you're in Minnesota territory, and all of a sudden there's a hush over the crowd. He's going, wait a minute, we know who that guy is. I mean, he really made a lot of good throws in the game. Obviously, it gets magnified when you turn the football over, and so you had a couple of mistakes. You know, you had a couple of interceptions that thwarted drives, and these were down in an area where you're thinking at least Younghoe Koo's going to be able to put points on the board, or you're going to be able to punch it in for a touchdown. So, and the second one was obviously the one that was the killer, because you'd had that moment, the special teams moment where Ray fumbles the football. And so what did he do? He got back out on the field, even though you hadn't touched the ball, and it went from 21-20, 21-21 to 35-21. You're moving the football. You're down deep in their territory, and you get the second pick. You throw a touchdown there, all of a sudden it's a 1-score game again, and we've got 5 minutes left in the game, and the game's on, right? So the thing that's overriding to me, guys, is you're going to make mistakes in the games. Things are going to happen. You turn the ball over, penalty here that thwarts a drive, whatever it is. They make a play, you miss coverage, whatever it is. But there can't be multiple on top of one. You can't stack those plays on. You've got to be able to come back and make your play, make them make a mistake. And Atlanta in the 4th quarter kept stacking up bad plays, and ultimately you look up and you're out of the game.
DJ, you and I were texting during the game, or I texted you, especially after the first drive, and I said, whoa, where did this come from? That looked pretty good. Yeah. To Arch's point, came out the gate, got off to a fast start, exactly what you wanted. But another area that we talked about before the show was penalties. And there have been moments where penalties have been an issue for Atlanta, but not necessarily week by week. But then you end up looking up after this game, and they ended up having the most penalty yards in a game by a team this entire season in the National Football League. Yeah. You couple that with a couple of interceptions, and you don't negate that by taking the football away 3 or 4 times yourself. And once again, in the National Football League, you compound those 2 things, penalties and turnovers, and you're going to lose. Like, it's just way too hard to overcome all of that.
Yeah, you think about the environment you're in. You're talking about going to a team that's 10-2 at the moment, and they got, 5-6 game win streak happening. They're playing good football. You can't go into a building like that and expect to win ball games and have those kind of mistakes happen because, as Art just mentioned, when they compound each other, good teams are going to make you pay. And I think that's what ultimately happened throughout this ball game is you have some instances where you have good plays, and then here comes a holding call. You have a good play, then, here comes a pass interference, or here comes a lack of communication. Then ultimately they capitalize on it. You're talking about on the first time I seen this play on the field goal where, I guess they call holding or whatever, and they come back 2 plays later and they score a touchdown. Like, regardless of what the call is, when you have situations like that, it hurts your team, and they're going to capitalize on it, especially playing a really good football team. You talk about an offense I thought that was really good early in the ball game on early down situation. I went back and looked at some of their plays on first down, and you think about the first play of the ball game, 12 yards, Bijan gets a good carry. Second drive of the game, first down, first play, it's deep left to Mooney for 24 yards. Next play, you get a 3-yard run, 5-yard run, 3rd and 2, Algier for 7 yards. Next drive, the third drive, first down run again, Bijan, 9-yard gain. 2 plays later, first down, 12 yards run, Bijan. Second quarter, next drive, 1st and 10, Algier, 6 yards. So my point is, you were doing good things early in this ball game, but then later in the ball game, you got away from it because of those penalties, because of things that kept you from being on schedule, and you weren't able to capitalize on it at all. So it definitely hurts you when you have those penalties, puts you behind the chains, makes it harder to call a game, and then makes it even harder, like you mentioned when we came on, the execution part of it. Mm-hmm. When you're doing things like that, it's harder to execute because you're having to overcome it. Then you're facing a defense that's really good too. So that all that combined is a tough pill to swallow, and it's even tougher to go win on the road versus a really good team that then the NFC that's vying for a playoff spot as well.
I got some numbers for you on this penalty thing, okay? And again, you can have an off day and you can have penalties, okay? Atlanta came into the game with 14 offensive holding calls in 12 games. They had 4 offensive holding calls in the first half.
First half.
Mm-hmm. Okay. They were averaging 5.6 penalties per game, which was 5th best in the National Football League. Okay, and in the last 3 games, they were averaging less than 5 penalties per game, which was 3rd best in the league. They had 12 penalties.
12. So
take that and do whatever you want to with it. I'm sure that the conspiracy theorists and all that kind of stuff out there. I mean, we can't complain about that part of it, but I'm just throwing some numbers out, and you can digest those any way you want to.
Dave, I wanted to ask you, and I'll ask both you guys, about what your keys were to the game going into it for Minnesota, because we don't necessarily talk about it, but the reason why I'm going to ask this is one of my keys to the game was ability to run the football on offense, right? Because they were going up against the number 1 rushing defense in the NFL. I think Minnesota was giving up less than 82 yards a game on the ground. Atlanta ends up rushing for 158 yards in the game. Like, that's a winning performance, right? Bijan, Tyler, both of them end up scoring rushing touchdown in the game. So you think, okay, one of Minnesota's strengths, we were able to not only neutralize, but make it a strength in our favor, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that Atlanta has to do is use these 2 running backs in this offensive line to create balance on offense. But I'm curious, what were some of your keys to the game, and how did they actually end up playing out? Do you remember?
Rack, I had 2 keys.
Okay.
I had 2 keys in the game. Number 1 key was limit explosive plays for their offense, because you had that wide receiver core and what they could do. Yeah. And that was the only one I wanted from defense. Just limit the big plays. Make them march the football, because I think you're going to find a way to win. On the offensive side of the football, finish drives when you get in the red zone.
Yeah.
And you didn't do that.
Yep.
Guys, in the last 4 games, you got a 4-game losing streak. Atlanta is 4 for 13 in the red zone in finishing drives for touchdowns. Those are my only 2 keys. And I told Raheem when I did his coach's show yesterday, he just shook his head like this because we failed on both.
Yeah. So 2 for 5 in the red zone was Atlanta against Minnesota. And then you go back to, I know we don't necessarily need to revisit because it's somewhat of a nightmare, but Addison and Jefferson both over 130 yards.
16 and 18 yards averaging.
16, I'll call it 18.9. To me, that's 19 in my math classes.
Yeah, you're going around.
Addison had a long of 49. Jefferson had a long of 52. Oliver had a long of 26. Running game gave up a long of 15 and 25. So explosive plays. Limit the plays downfield. We knew they had really...
They're going to make some, right?
They're going to make some.
Yeah, but not like that.
But you want Addison and Jefferson to maybe combine for 8 or 9 catches and maybe a total of 120 yards. Then you got a chance at winning that game. But when those two guys combine for 265 and 5 tubs, it's going to be hard to beat the Minnesota Vikings at home if you're not perfect, guys. And I think we pretty much laid out that we're not perfect. Let's talk a little bit defense here, Shock, because you can sit here and you can harp on the offense and the interceptions and Kirk Cousins, and guys, rightfully so, right? That's the story of the National Football League. When you make the most money on the team and they're paying you to come in and produce and you don't produce, that's kind of life of playing that position. But I would also say that 42 points is not necessarily winning performance either.
No.
So, Shock, what are you seeing on the defense or not seeing on the defense that needs to make improvements over this final stretch here for Atlanta to get back into the playoff discussion in their own division?
I think we got to call spade a spade on this one when it comes to what we saw, especially last weekend. I thought communication was a big deal in the secondary, at least in this ball game. And there were a couple of instances where you look up and you got guys running free in the secondary. Something we haven't seen a lot of this season. You thought this was, for the most part of this season, you got veteran guys on the back end who played a bunch of football, and whenever a guy catches a football, there's not much yak around it. And I thought the communication part was really lacking in this ball game because of how they were able to create some explosive. Also, let's be honest, Sam Darnold made a couple off-schedule plays that really hurt you. You're talking about having the quarterback hemmed up in the pocket, and he finds a way to get out and make some plays down the field. That hurt you as well. Now, Sam Darnold's a guy who can move around a little bit, but not the way you thought he did in that ball game. One instance is you look back at one of the Jordan Addison touchdowns in the ball game. They're in the low red zone. He comes in motion, and you don't see A.J. and D. Alford communicate. You can see it on film. They actually, when they come down, Alford and both A.J. are both looking at our man Jefferson, and he's running a corner route. Addison's run a out route. Simple smash concept. Usually there's communication of lock, or maybe they knew coming in that we have man coverage. But somehow or another, they lost the communication within, and one guy didn't do it. And here comes Addison on an easy out route for a touchdown. Small things that hurt you in communication turned into really big plays for them, and they capitalized on them. Those are things you cannot have, like you just mentioned, versus two guys like that. And a guy who Sam Darnold's been around for a while, you give him time, he's going to find those dudes. And those are really good receivers on the outside that made you pay for it. So I thought the communication was lacking on the outside. And then, got to give them some credit. They drew up a couple plays for Aaron Jones out in space, and he had some chunk plays as well that hurt you.
So Sam Darnold, you mentioned, like, he's been around for a while, but I think everybody would pretty much say in unison that he's not been overly effective throughout his career. It's been this year. And the difference is sometimes you're around a different play caller that maybe clicks. Sometimes you get confidence, and confidence comes sometimes from luck, right? Like, he got an opportunity because a guy ahead of him got hurt. And sometimes luck plays into a guy getting an opportunity, right? And then Kevin O'Connell might just be the whisperer for Sam Darnold to get the best out of him.
Played in New England, right?
Well, I'll give you one that's even better than that. We're talking about New England, obviously, yes. When Bledsoe goes down, nothing's better than Brady coming in off the bench. So I can't trump you there. But think about the Ram teams. I mean, Trent Green's supposed to be the starter there.
Yeah.
He goes down, and Kurt Warner comes off the bench. He's a Hall of Famer. So it's happened in the league, and you're right, Rack. I think you hit the nail on the head. You find a place you're comfortable it doesn't get any more comfortable than Hawkinson, Jefferson, and Addison. I mean, that's about as good as it gets.
Not to mention Aaron Jones in the backfield. I mean, he's got the versatility to catch the ball, be a true 3-down back. But Arch, I wanted to get your comment on the defense, because it's like, okay, 4 sacks in the game. And we've been talking all season long about inability to get sacks. Last in the football league, in the National Football League in sacks. In the last couple of weeks, been able to get after the quarterback. But again, when they end up scoring 42 points and they go 8 of 12 on 3rd down, it's like you can't even really look at the sacks and be like, oh, yeah, we made progress, because you got absolutely blitzed on 3rd down. Like, that's not going to help you win.
Yeah, and think about what you, in combination with what you're talking about here, as you start trying to find and accentuate the positives. Prior to the final drive, where the game was pretty much over, and you could feel it, that the game was pretty much done. They went ahead and went down and got a touchdown. Aaron Jones scores a touchdown, a 15-yard run or something like that. They had 54 yards rushing in the game going into the final drive. I mean, they ended up with 115 yards, so they rushed for more yards in the final drive when things were kind of done than they did. So not only did you sack the quarterback, you stuffed the run game. That's 2 weeks in a row you crammed the run game right back at the team you're playing. You've been able to get after the passer. So Shock hit it dead on. He was perfect with the communication thing. The last touchdown, where I guess it's Jefferson runs right by the coverage, there was a communication between safety and Alford and I think maybe Jesse Bates, where they're trying to negotiate because they came with pressure. And Justin Simmons is there to make the play, and he misses. He just whiffs on it, and those are the things that compound. Okay, you whiff on that. Now what happens on the back end? You and I both know that if we could buy time against man coverage, they can't cover all day long back there, especially if they blow a coverage, which they did a couple times in the game. So, obviously you got really good coaches on the defensive side. Jerry Gray was an all-pro corner and has been a really good coach in this league as far as coaching secondary. That's Raheem's bag too. Raheem knows the secondary. He used to tutor the secondary here. You remember that, Shock? You go out there and he'd have the secondary out there for 45 minutes after practice, after they'd already practiced 2 hours. He'd have them out there going over the formations and stuff. They'll dial those guys back in, but it doesn't get this game back for you, and it hurts your confidence a little bit when you get dashed like that.
Yeah. So here's kind of my thoughts going into this. When we're covering the Falcons and we're shooting a podcast and we are trying to do our best to provide answers, but at the end of the day, we are not the ones on the field and we are not the ones coaching the team. However, as we turn the page, my feelings are that this week is such a pivotal week, because obviously we saw Tampa got the win last week, so they pull back ahead in the divisional standings, and right now they would be the winners of the NFC South, okay? You go on the road this week, you're going to play a Las Vegas Raiders team that's 2-11, okay? Just played Tampa Bay last weekend down in Florida. It's pivotal, because if there is ever what you would dial up as a must-win, this has to be a must-win. And there's so many different kind of tentacles coming off here, right, guys? We got 3 7-10 win seasons, or 7-10 seasons. You're trying to change the tenor, the culture, from a 500 or a below 500 losing franchise to a winning franchise. There's so much conversation in the offseason and during the season about outrunning the South. And Atlanta outran the South the first, call it, half of the season. Yeah. And since then, stubbing our toe. 4 straight losses now. And if you're not careful, you're going to look up and you're going to see Tampa create separation and Atlanta get lost in the dust. That's why I'm talking about how pivotal of a game this is. Going on the road, yes, but playing a 2-11 team. So, Arch, I ask you can't go into this one and say, oh, yeah, they should be playing with a ton of confidence. When you're on a 4-game losing streak, there's no such thing as going in with a ton of confidence.
Correct.
So how does this team, players, coaching staff, front office, refocus their mind in going out on the road to the West Coast to play a 2-11 team, understanding the importance of winning this football game?
Well, and I think that we all went through stuff similar to this. Is the work week is where you get yourself ready to play, okay? And then obviously you got to pass the test when the game starts. So you're studying for the test, and then the test comes. But how much study you put in relax you for game time. And so these guys can't allow the things that have been, like Shock was talking about, communication in the secondary. You can't let that carry over to the next week. That can't be something that inhibits you or freezes you up, or you don't play free. Study, do the thing, correct the things you did wrong this week. Now work on some of the things you were having a little bit of struggle with, and then you come back, you go play. But you got to be able to cut it loose in the game. You can't come in thinking, oh God, I hope we don't do this. Uh-oh, that happened. Here we go again. That can't happen. Yep. You can't turn the football over. Okay, we won 5 of 6 games. We were +1 in the giveaway takeaway. And now we weren't turning it over very much. We weren't really taking it away very much, but we're kind of even there. We're +1 in the giveaway takeaway. The last 4 games were -8. Yeah. So you're not gaining any, and you're turning it over multiple times per game.
Right.
So if you're going to clean one thing up, that's one thing you need to clean up, is you got to even that part of it out.
Guys, this is the second time I've used this phrase this week, and you two both know that I'm a softball dad. I got 2 girls that play softball, and I'm going to borrow a phrase from a college coach that I have a lot of respect for, and it's Lonnie Alameda from Florida State. And one of her big phrases that she tells her team is, be where your feet are, okay? And I think that can translate to so many different areas, and it can translate to the Atlanta Falcons in this game, is be where your feet are. Yep. And what I mean by that is, we always talk about short-term memory, got to turn the page, but you cannot think about what happened last week, the week before the bye week in New Orleans. You have to be where your feet are this week, Shock. And I think if what Arch is talking about, they have a great week of practice. Yep. They come into this game with confidence because they love the game plan and they feel like they're going to execute it. And then they step on the field in Las Vegas and they just say, let's be where our feet are, right? Let's just focus on what's happening in between these white lines in Las Vegas. That, to me, yeah, I could sit here and I could say all the coach speak I want, but when you're on a 4-game losing streak, how do you find a way to make that become a reality to turn it around and get a win this week?
I think the mindset has to change. And not saying that they don't probably look at it this way, but I think going into this ball game, the mindset has to be 1-game season. And I think when you just mentioned outrunning the South, and not saying this happened, but when you play in those games, the heightened focus, I think, happens that, hey, this is what we've been talking about, is we have to make sure we play really well in our division because we want to outrun the South. And then it becomes an instance where now where you are, you lost 4 straight, and you just mentioned it. Now you're chasing a team that's in your division, but you can't think about all that. You can't let all that kind of stuff come into your mind, because guess what? You lose sight of what's important now. You lose sight of where your feet are right now, which is the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think that's what this team has to do, is say, you know what? We got a 1-game season from now on. If we want to make the playoffs, we have to win our first playoff game, which is on the road on Monday Night Football. And that's where it starts, and it starts in practice, like Arch mentioned, making sure all the details that you're, fine-tuning on for this ball game, whatever it is that you saw last week, now you take it to the practice field and you make it better. You don't let that happen again so that it doesn't compound like we talked about in the ball game. This is a game where you have to take it 1 game at a time and say, you know what, here we are. This is where our season stands. It doesn't matter what happens next week when you go play the Giants. It doesn't matter what Tampa does on the road this week. You can only control where you are right now. You can only control the game that you're in. So all the other stuff is irrelevant. Making yourself the best player and then making yourself the best team is where you stand right now, and that starts with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, and I think they come into the game, guys, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, they come into the game with it's not like everything's wrong, okay? They're defending the run. They've defended the run extremely well the last 2 weeks. They've gotten after the passer, 9 sacks the last 2 weeks. That's a positive you carry down there. You want to take that with you. Now we need to fix some of the communication. Shock talked about it. Fix some of that in the back end. On the offensive side of the football, you're running the ball. Okay? You had over 150 yards rushing in this game. That's a winning performance. On third down, you came into this game in the previous 3 games converting third down 29% of the time. You were 12 of 41 on third down. You were 7 of 13 on third down in this game. You fixed that in the week going into this game. So there's some things that there are positives you're carrying. You're not carrying just a bunch of dragging a trunk with negative stuff in it. You're taking a lot of good stuff with you. Now we've got to clean up some of that periphery stuff like Shock talking. And you hit the nail on the head, Rack. Okay, that's great. We're taking all this stuff in. Let's take stock and all that. But now how can I be the best I can be right now? In this game. You're exactly right. And there's no magic pill to take. We've all gone through it. We've all struggled at times with what we're doing. So you got to take stock in yourself right now. Okay, what can I do right now to make me better than I was the week ago? And I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to do all the things I need to do leading up to this game, and then I'm going to put that on performance on Monday night.
There are quite a few teams in the NFL that are feeling good about themselves, feeling confident. They go into work and they got smiles on their face, and it's happy-go-lucky, jovial. And then guess what? There's another half of the league that's probably not too happy, just much like the Atlanta Falcons. That's just the nature of competition in the National Football League. Guys, before we go, I wanted to talk about two other things. We're in Atlanta, and there's two somewhat of Atlanta ties that Atlanta is going to face in this game, and I'm going to let you guys talk about either or both of them. Yeah. One being some guy named Brock Bowers, who happened to play at Georgia, that I think we all knew that this kid was absolutely special, and he's tearing it up for the Raiders. And then some guy named Desmond Ridder. Looks like he's going to end up being the quarterback to face Atlanta in this game after the injury last week. So I'll just tee it up to you guys. What are your thoughts on either of those two players and what sticks out?
Well, I mean, I'll let Shock talk on Bowers because there's a lot. I'll let him do the dog on dog there, and he's been phenomenal. There, and they're going to have something special planned for him. But in having a chance to work with Dez when he was here, he's a bright guy. He's got a tremendous amount of talent. He came in off the bench for Aiden O'Connell last weekend, went 12 of 18, handled the ball extremely well, did some good stuff. You can bet there's going to be a little juice flowing when he sees his former team when given an opportunity and not really being given another opportunity. And so I think Desmond Ridder is a guy that you're going to have to control the athleticism. Okay, we just saw two quarterbacks that can move, but they're not maybe not to the level of Dez being able to move around. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. But I'm excited for him to get a chance to play. I thought he was a quality human being here. Got a chance to know him and his family and stuff. A good dude. Just didn't work out here, and I'm glad he's getting another opportunity. Let's just hope he doesn't realize his promise because he's pretty promising coming out of Cincinnati.
Yeah, and then get the chance to do it in front of the entire country on Monday night too. I mean, that's a big deal too. So I think you're right. I mean, as much as he'll downplay it, everybody will downplay it. Oh, deep down inside, he wants to go for 405 times, no doubt. But the other guy, man, Brock Bowers has been, like Arch just mentioned, you mentioned it, right, tremendous. I mean, he's fourth in the league among, receiving yards in the National Football League. Just among tight ends, crushing tight ends. But you're talking about fourth in the league in tight ends, 933 yards, 118 targets on 87 receptions. You think they trying to get him to football? I mean, he had a game 2 weeks ago versus the Chiefs. I mean, unbelievable. I think 10 for 140. I mean, he had a monster game versus them. Brock has always been that kind of guy that doesn't care really about the numbers. He just loves ball. He wants to go compete, and any chance he gets, he's going to go out. He's going to play the best to his ability. And he's been that guy since the day when I met him when he got to Georgia, and then, all the way throughout his career. Didn't say much. Don't matter what you say to him. You can talk trash all you want to him. He may smile at you and keep going. But the guy works his tail off, and he's going to be a handful for obviously this defense to handle. And they're going to go in knowing exactly what Brock Bowers can do. They're going to understand the routes he likes to run. But I think he's more physical than you think. He's a lot faster than you think as well. So this will be a huge challenge for this secondary and for these linebackers to have to, kind of block him down well. I mean, you got Michael Mayer out there as well, who's a really good player too. They drafted two really good tight ends, big and physical dudes. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go about attacking him.
Shock, you saw in or around Bowers his whole career at Georgia. Okay, take us inside some of the teams, and it didn't happen very often, but take us into some of the teams that were able to maybe keep him hemmed in a little bit. What did they do? Can you think back, and what did they do to try to limit what Bowers brought to the table?
Yeah, not a lot of teams did. I'll be honest.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think the thing that makes Brock so special is his ability to be able to yards after the catch.
Okay.
And you think about it, he has an uncanny ability to be able to catch the football, but then make that first guy miss, and it's hard. He's like, when you look at him, he doesn't seem like he's really a big physical dude, but somehow he breaks tackles. He finds ways to get extra yards. I mean, he's got 466 yards after the catch right now of his 900 yards. So, but I think teams who had success with him, obviously it's about getting hands on him early. He's a guy that once he gets into your second and third level, he can make you pay, and he's going to probably end up catching the football when it's around him. He's one of those kind of guys that really sure-handed guy. But I've seen over the years when he's at Georgia when teams would try to attack him at the line of scrimmage or get his hands on him, and then as a quarterback, your eyes got to go somewhere else. So you're off him. So I think that's part of the plan is not giving them free releases, not giving them free access to just run through your secondary. If you can get your hands on him, majority of the time and try to reroute him, That's probably the best change you'll have.
The one thing you do have is if Ritter plays, and he's taking snaps in practice, we all know that the backup quarterback gets a handful of snaps, but most of it goes to the starter. Mm-hmm. So his opportunity to work with these guys is going to be somewhat limited. So what you normally do is you go to the guy that's your alpha. Okay, you're going to find, but try to get the ball to Bowers. Now, Jacoby Myers, as you mentioned, has some ability to be that second guy, but this isn't the Viking offense you're facing. You're not facing Addison, Jefferson, and Hawkinson. This is a group that's a little bit more limited, so it might be the fact, and we'll see it play out, but Atlanta doubled Ladd McConkey in the second half. I mean, he caught like 8 balls in the first half. And they said, you know what? He's the only guy that's bothering us. We're going to lock him down. And they didn't do anything in the second half on offense.
Yep.
Okay, don't be surprised if we don't start the game with having some kind of double or two sets of eyes on where Bowers goes to try to limit what he can do. But Shock's right. I mean, what'd you say? Half his yardage is after he catches the football. Physical dude now. You better bring your hat to the game.
I remember one of my keys, I think, when we played New Orleans was anyone but Kamara. I think this is another one of those games. Anyone but Bowers.
Good call.
Right? Anyone but Bowers. We all knew the type of generational talent that he was, seeing him at Georgia, and not because he's an opponent of the Atlanta Falcons. I'm just happy for the young man that it's actually playing out in the NFL. Like, his talent is translating, and he is tearing it up just like everybody else thought he would. Sometimes
with what is he, third quarterback now?
Third guy. Just hey, get me the rock. I'm 89. Throw it to me.
All right, so Atlanta Falcons Monday Night Football traveling out to the West Coast to play the Las Vegas Raiders. Brock Bowers and company, and maybe a little bit of Desmond Ridder as well as the starting quarterback. Of course, that's going to be Monday night at 8:30 p.m. on ESPN, and we will likely be back the day after to break it all down. Are you going to be back in time, by the way?
Yeah, I think
guys
so.
Get back like 4 or 5 o'clock
It'd probably be later. It'd probably be earlier than that in the morning.
Go to that group takes like, fellas, we need to move that thing back a little bit.
Yeah,
I know how you guys view our podcast materials basically whenever you want, and it's not like you view anything live, but we may end up getting pushed back a little bit next week because Arch might still be
I'll try to screw up the time. I may be I may be one-eyed for that one.
Exactly.
But,
you may have to carry a little bit more next week. Okay, Shock.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for joining us in the Falcons Audible presented by AT&T. On behalf of Shock, Arch, I'm Rack. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week to break all the game down against the Las Vegas Raiders.